Welcome back, friends. Welcome to the Alyosha Society, where we're going to keep on pursuing truth and beauty and goodness through great literature. This is video number 2 out of what's going to end up being 10 total videos on the Killer Angels and Michael Shaara. In the first video, we did some historical context to kind of get us ready. The first half of the 19th century, I think we did 7 key events that are sort of getting us up to the 1850s and the 1860s at the beginning of the Civil War. And then we're going to be zeroing in, not just on, the American Civil War, but the book we're reading is really about 3 days. 3 days, July the 1st, July the 2nd, and July the 3rd of 1863. It was during that time that the Battle of Gettysburg took place. So in this video, what I want to do is I want to get to the issue of, I hear a lot of, oh boy, I guess you could call it misinformation maybe, about what was the American Civil War really all about. Some folks say it was about slavery, and other folks say it had nothing to do with slavery. So the folks that say it only had to do with slavery, they're wrong. The folks who say it had nothing to do with slavery, I think they're wrong too. So hear me out. Hear me out. I'd like to take a bit of a deeper look into what led to the American Civil War. So we, about the literary toolbox. So in the literary toolbox, in the previous video, we did historical context, and we're going to be doing more of that here. Sorry. Oops. Here we go. I also want to do just a little bit. I'm not going to do a ton here, not as much as I usually do, but I do want to do some biographical context. What I mean by that is the biography of the author of the book we're reading, Michael Shaara, who wrote The Killer Angels. All right. So here, let's finish up with our historical context. So what actually caused the American Civil War? Well, I want you to think of it sort of like, sort of like an explosion. It was an explosion, wasn't it? It was an explosion of violence and death and heartache and misery and pain. It was an explosion. I want you to think of it like a volcano, sort of. And a volcano has pressure that's building up, in the mountain before it erupts. And then something sets it off. So we're going to be looking at what are the pressures that were kind of boiling beneath the surface before violence breaks out, before the North and the South are fighting against each other. And then 3 kind of mini sparks that definitely almost, and then the one big spark that finally blew the lid off the mountain. So let's get started with our 5 pressures. There you go. There's our volcano. And so the first one. So did slavery have nothing to do with the American Civil War? Of course not. Slavery really is a key issue in what caused the American Civil War. There's no way around it. It had to do with other things as well, and I'll get to those things. But friends, in the first half of the 19th century, there was tremendous tension between what we call the abolitionists, that is, those who wanted to get rid of slavery entirely, and those who believed, look, you know what, we ought to be able to make our own decision. If you want to have slaves, that's fine. We ought to be able to be free to make our own decision about it. There's a question of humanity. There's a question of individuals made in the image of God. There's a question of whether or not, slavery is an immoral thing in itself and should never exist. So of course, slavery is a huge issue, but it's just not the only issue. The second kind of, pressure boiling beneath the surface, the issue of states' rights. As you all know, the United States today, we are 50 operating states that have a full government. They have a legislative branch, they have a governor, they have a judicial branch, they have a court system, and they have a legislative branch, they have a Congress. It looks a little bit different in each state, but each state in that sense has its own little sovereignty. But there's this thing called the federal government. There's this thing called, the national picture. And so states have the right to do lots of things. The big issue is, at what point does the federal government have the right to come in and say, you Kentucky, you Oklahoma, you Montana, you do or you do not have the right to do this or that. And that tension has existed from the beginning, from the birth of the nation, and it will exist, friends. It's a natural tension. And it makes sense that that tension is there. But that tension is not only about slavery. It's about anything. It's about other issues as well. Yes, during this time, slavery was obviously top of the list. A lot of folks overlook this next one, but I don't think we should discount the importance of sectionalism. What is sectionalism? Sectionalism is sort of like this. You know how you have a favorite sports team? Who's your favorite football team? Who's your favorite baseball team? Think about it. Now think about who's the rival of that team. Okay, now I married into a family that love the Washington football team, the Washington Commanders, used to be the Washington Redskins. And that means that a part of the agreement is you have to hate the Dallas Cowboys. It's just part of the deal, guys. It's just, I'm sorry, if you're a Dallas fan, that's the only way I could get the girl. Okay, I have to hate the Dallas Cowboy. And there's that tension. I mean, it's kind of a real tension. It's not like, I would punch one in the face, but we don't like them. That's kind of what sectionalism is, except it's geographic. You know how if you live in the South, you kind of look with suspicion upon those Yankees, those Northerners, their accent's all wrong. You don't like their politics, or you don't like their culture. You don't like their music, and vice versa. If you're from the North, you probably have some stereotypes about what people are like down there in Alabama or Louisiana. That sectionalism can be funny, and it can be, humorous and cute, but it can also have a little bit of teeth to it, to where people in different regions actually start to become genuinely suspicious of people over there and to distrust them. Sectionalism. So that the cultures in the North and the South are developing and growing in very different directions. You've got the North, which is, manufacturing and such. Not that they didn't have farmland, but in the South, you've got a primarily agrarian society. Those are two different worlds. Find a friend who grew up in a big city, and then find another friend who grew up on a farm out in Kansas, and you will find that they are very different kinds of people. And sectionalism is what causes us to sort of not like the other. And that is growing throughout the 19th century between Northerners and Southerners. Another issue is the tariff. What was the tariff? Okay, the folks in the North, who, again, in the North, we're mainly talking about manufacturing. So let's just say making clothing, textiles, for example. In the South, it's mainly agrarian. So the North, of course, it's natural, guys. Everybody wants to have an economic advantage. So the folks in the North wanted to impose an extra tax on any imported items. Okay, so just bear with me here. Let me explain how this works. So let's just say that France is selling shirts, French shirts. And they make them, they ship them over to the United States, and we buy them. And people think it's really cool to have some French fashion. But because the North wants to have a financial advantage, they say, well, we're going to put a $20 tariff on every single shirt that comes in to the country. What does that mean? It means that the French have to pay an extra $20 to get that shirt into the marketplace in the United States. Well, guys, what that means is when that shirt ends up at the Gap, or Kohl's or wherever whatever store that shirt ends up in, it's going to cost $20 more. Now, wait a second. So the North, the folks in the factories in the North, they make the same shirt and they're selling it, let's say, for $30. And the one that came from France, let's just say they're basically the same shirt. The one from France costs $50. Which one are you going to buy? Okay, you'd be an idiot to buy the one from France. Why would you do that? So but the South doesn't have this economic advantage because their whole economy is primarily agrarian. You see the problem? So the folks in the South are looking at the folks in the North saying, whoa, wait a second. We want to have some way to have a financial advantage like that. And the folks in the North are sorry. The tariff caused more tension, more pressure building in the mountain. And then finally, the fifth pressure, expansionism. As you all know, we've already talked about it in the previous video, the United States in the 1820s, 30s, 40s, 50s was not what it is today. There weren't 50 states. And we talked about the Louisiana Purchase, we talked about the Missouri Compromise. So as Americans are expanding westward and getting closer and closer to the Pacific Ocean, more states are coming into the Union. The big question on everyone's mind was, when those new states come into the Union, are they going to be slave states or are they going to be free states? The abolitionists are, of course, pushing, we don't want to expand because you slave owners, all you want to do is have more land so you can have more slaves, so you can have more money and exploit more individuals. We think slavery is immoral, it's wrong. And then folks who believe that we should be able to have slaves are thinking, man, let's just grow this thing. Let's just go all the way to the West Coast and let's make as many of those states slave states as possible. Friends, when you put the issue of slavery itself, the fight over states' rights, what states can and can't do, sectionalism, that paranoia and tension and distrust, the tariff gives the North this economic advantage. And then the issue of fighting over new states coming, these pressures are like it's boiling, guys. It's like that water, when it first starts to boil when you're boiling your eggs or whatever in the morning, but it hasn't blown up yet. Now there are three mini sparks that don't quite blow the lid off the mountain, but almost. First of all, there's the compromise. Hold on just a second, guys. I'm having a bit of an issue with my video here. All right, I think I may have gotten it fixed. Sorry for the little disruption there. Let's get right back over to our visuals. Okay, back to our three mini sparks. So we've got the five pressures. Now, the three mini sparks, Compromise of 1850. Now, again, it's easy for us to judge and to look back upon the politicians and leaders, even our founding fathers, all the way up to the Missouri Compromise and then 1850 here, and say, these guys were immoral, they were bad, they were evil, they should have eradicated slavery. Okay, fine. You can have your opinions about that if you want. But it would have been much better if the founding fathers would have dealt with the issue of slavery instead of letting it kind of go on, kicking the can down the road, because the problem just gets worse and worse. It festers. And the Compromise of 1850 is basically a series of pieces of legislation. And I'm not going to deal with all of them. I just want to deal with one of them. It's called the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act. And so basically the Fugitive Slave Act said, okay, if you come across an escaped slave, you are bound by law to return that slave. Well, the abolitionists, wherever they are, north, south, east, or west, are just outraged by this. They're being told that they have to go against their conscience and they have to return any escaped slave back to its owner. That did not go well. And if you've ever heard of Harriet Beecher Stowe and Uncle Tom's Cabin, another really good novel for you to read, she wrote that novel really because of her anger over the Fugitive Slave Act. And she wrote that novel, and the message of the novel is slavery is evil. Why are we still even talking about it? Second mini spark, the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott decision. So the Dred Scott decision is a very interesting case that made it all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. And it basically goes something like this. If a slave owner is traveling with a slave and crosses over state lines into a free state, then does that mean that the slave is then free? Well, Dred Scott was the name of a slave who sued for his freedom because his owner did that very thing. It goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, sorry, Mr. Scott. That's not the law. That's no. And so once again, the abolitionists are outraged by the Dred Scott decision. And you've probably heard of John Brown's Raid. John Brown's Raid, Harper's Ferry, what is now the northeastern panhandle of my home state, West Virginia, a place called Harper's Ferry. There was a federal arsenal there. That's a place with a lot of weapons owned by the federal government. John Brown he wasn't just an abolitionist. He was sort of like an abolitionist on steroids. He was ready to do violence. And so John Brown raids this federal arsenal. His plan is to steal all of these guns, to get the guns into the hands of slaves, and to basically encourage a violent uprising. John Brown's Raid, that's 1859, if you're taking notes, 1859. See that? We're inching up ever closer to the very beginning. Now, what was the big boom? We've looked at the 5 pressures that are boiling in the mountain, these 3 mini sparks. What was it that set the mountain to blow? Some of you probably already knew this. It was the election of Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president of the United States. Why? Was simply the fact that he was elected. Because whether he would have done it or not, I mean, we don't know what would have happened if the circumstances would have been different. But the folks in the South decided if Lincoln is elected, then he is going to free the slaves. Our lives, our economy, everything is going to be destroyed. So, we have elections in the fall, and then the president is inaugurated we do it in January now. They did it a little bit later back then. But a number of southern states seceded from the Union before Lincoln was even inaugurated. So he wasn't even officially the president, but the southern states saw this abolitionist, this guy who is opposed to slavery, if he's elected. So when Lincoln was elected, boom. That's what really leads to the explosion. Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and we're talking about, the battles, but we're going to be focusing here primarily on the Battle of Gettysburg, which happens 3 years after this in 1863. And as you all know, Abraham Lincoln would deliver, I don't know, I think it's safe to say one of the most famous speeches of all time right there. the Gettysburg Address. So way more to come. Now in the next video, we are actually going to get into the book. But before we get there, I want you to know a little bit about the author. Friends, it's always a good idea. Whatever book you're reading of whatever genre, you should know a little bit about the author. You're reading that person's thoughts. You're entering into the mind of this person. You should know who it is. Michael Shaara was born in 1928. He was 60 years old, died of a heart attack, actually, in 1988. 1 year after I graduated from high school. So if I would have known who this guy was back then, I might have tried to meet him. In 1951, he graduated from Rutgers University. He had a really fascinating life. I'm just going to hit a few highlights. He was actually an amateur boxer. He served as a police officer for a time in his life. He not only wrote historical fiction, the genre of The Killer Angels, but he also wrote science fiction, very talented writer. For a period of time, he also taught at Florida State University. Any Seminole fans watching this video? Michael Shaara taught there. And it was in 1974, 14 years before he died, that he wrote this book, The Killer Angels. And it was a good one. Yeah, it's a good one. And the world liked it. And it won a Pulitzer in 1975, a Pulitzer Prize for fiction. That's just a little bit, just to get to know the guy. And we'll probably talk about him a little bit more as we go along. Where's he coming from? What's his worldview? What's his perspective? But I think you're going to like the book, whether you like the American Civil War and so forth. This book is historical fiction. So it has fiction mixed in with historical fact. The purpose of that is to make it more interesting and engaging and to get the feeling that you're actually there and you're sort of seeing and smelling and hearing and experiencing the events, these 3 horrific days in July of 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg. There's the video list. Take a screenshot if you haven't done it, but you should go ahead and read Monday, June the 29th before you watch the next video. And I'm going to tell you ahead of time, I have a very special treat for you in the next video. Yeah, I have a surprise. Think you're going to like it. I'm not going to say any more. Don't want to spoil it. See you then.